Well, you know, it's not like everybody's families are necessarily particularly happy places to be. Turns out that your inbuilt temperament, your inbuilt personality, which constitutes a set of filters through which you view the world, also alters the manner in which you process information. You have to figure out ways of simplifying the world, right? Because you just can't do everything. And so people are specialized. They have specialized niches that they occupy. You can think about them as social niches. A niche is a place where your particular skills would serve to maintain you. And so if you're extroverted, you're going to look for a social niche because you like to be around people. And if you're introverted, you're going to spend much more time on your own. And so if you're an introverted person, for example, you're going to want a job where you're not selling and where you're not surrounded by groups of people who are making social demands on you all the time, because it'll wear you out. Whereas if you're extroverted, that's just exactly what you want. And so the extrovert sees the world as a place of social opportunity, and the introvert sees the world as a place to retreat from and spend time alone. And it turns out that both of those modes of being are valid. The issue, at least to some degree, is whether or not you're fortunate enough to match your temperament with the demands of the environment, and I suppose also whether you're fortunate enough so that you're born in an era where there actually is a niche for your particular temperament, because it isn't necessarily the case that that will be the case. Imagine that all of these temperamental dimensions vary because of evolutionary pressure, right? So there's a distribution of extroversion, a normal distribution. Most people are somewhere in the middle, and then as you go out towards the extremes, there are fewer and fewer people. And what that means is that on average, across large spans of time, there have been environments that match every single position on that distribution, with most of the environments matching the center, because otherwise we wouldn't have evolved that way. And so sometimes being really extroverted is going to work well for you in a minority of environments, a minority of niches, and sometimes it's just going to be a catastrophe. I suspect, for example, that if you live in a tyrannical society where any sign of personally oriented activity is likely to get you in trouble, that being extroverted and low in neuroticism wouldn't be a very good idea, because you're going to be mouthy and happy and saying a lot of things, unable to keep your thoughts to yourself, and you're going to be relatively fearless. Now, I don't know that for sure, because we haven't done the studies that precisely match temperamental proclivity to environmental demand, but you get what I mean. Those particular traits, you can think of those as ways that you simplify the world, right? There's lots of different places that you can act in the world, and there's lots of different ways you can look at it and survive. That's why you can be a plumber and a lawyer and an engineer, and those all work, right? Even though they're very different modes of being. And you can have different personalities and survive, as long as you're capable of finding the place where your particular filters and behavioral proclivities match the demand of the environment. And a huge part, I would say, of successful adaptation is precisely that. Now, there are other elements of personality too. It's not obvious that your personality is inside you. You know, you think, you know, a human being is a strange multi-level thing. And you might ask yourself, well, for example, you know, is your mother more a part of you than your arm? Or maybe even more precisely, is your child more a part of you than your arm? And certainly people will do drastically self-sacrificing things to maintain the lives of their children. And so you're a person, and you're made out of all sort of subcomponents of a person, none of which you can see when you look at a person, all the complicated machinery inside you that makes you who you are. And then outside of that, of course, you're nested in all sorts of complex systems. So you're part of a family, and you're part of a community, and that's part of a province, and that's part of a state, and that's part of an international consortium of states, and that's part of an ecosystem. And how you make a distinction between you and the systems that you're embedded in is also of extraordinary difficulty. And very many people have a first depressive episode after something genuinely terrible has happened to them, right? They've lost someone, or they've become injured, or they've become unemployed, because unemployment is a terrible shock to people. And it's not precisely self-evident that you can consider someone who's unhappy and desperate because they no longer have a job depressed. They're certainly sad and they're not doing very well, but the fact that they no longer have an income is actually something with dramatic practical consequences, and treating that as if it's a mental disorder seems to be counterproductive.